Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today for Strategies for Supporting Language Learners in Remote Teaching Environments. My name is Claudia Rodriguez, and I will be your workshop facilitator for today. Teacher Created Materials is a family-owned company that began in the garage of a teacher over 40 years ago. Our founder, Rochelle Cracchiolo, envisioned creating a company focused on one vision: to create a world in which children love to learn. All our materials and resources are created by teachers, for teachers, and students with this vision in mind. And our founder embodies this spirit in many ways. Here is Rochelle supporting Read Across America at a local elementary school. Rochelle is pictured here with Corinne Burton, the president of Teacher Created Materials, and Deanne Mendoza, Executive Vice President of Teacher Created Materials, both of whom are also her daughters. The spirit of Teacher Created Materials lives in this family. Now, before we jump into our goals and the agenda for the day, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Like I said earlier, my name is Claudia Rodriguez. I have been in education for 20 years. The picture you see in front of you is me at age 7 when I first arrived to the United States. I am originally from a small Latin American country. My father was receiving death threats, and he decided to send my 15-year-old sister and myself to visit my aunt in California for a month, in the hopes that the situation at home would resolve itself. Before he put us on the airplane, he said, "Si te da sed, dile a la hermosa que quieres orange juice, please." Those became my first 3 words in English. As the situation did not resolve itself, that was the year that I learned many things. I learned that it was hard to be an ESL student. I learned that I wanted to be a teacher like Mrs. Hanks. I learned that I wanted to work with students like myself. So I have devoted my time as an educator to work with ESL and bilingual students, as well as teachers who serve the ESL and bilingual students. Our goals for today are: 1, to review best practices to support English language learners in a virtual environment. 2, discover strategies to bridge the gap between content and language. And 3, to explore new ways to engage English language learners with complex texts and vocabulary acquisition. Let's review what you will need to be prepared for this virtual training. First, you will need your Learning Reflection Guide. This guide is an important document as it will allow you to reflect on your learning throughout this workshop. You may also need sticky notes and a pen. Speaking of that Learning Reflection Guide, throughout the workshop, you will occasionally be directed to stop and do something on that note-taking guide. Anytime you see this image, you will know that you need to complete a portion of your Learning Reflection Guide. Are you ready? Well, let's start with a weather report. This is not your usual weather report. This is an activity that will help you gauge how your students are feeling. I used to use this in my classroom all the time, and when we didn't do this activity whole group at the beginning of the day, students would find a way to tell me they were feeling sunny or they were feeling like a snowstorm was approaching. During these times of uncertainty and lots of change, it's a great idea to start the day with social and emotional support. Also, when working on this activity with your students, you are building language. You will address the 4 domains of language, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So today, I want you to think about your weather report. Think about how you are feeling today in the form of a weather report and explain why. I have provided you with sentence stems in both English and Spanish. Feel free to write your weather report in either language. Here are some examples. Today I feel partly cloudy because I didn't drink enough coffee before the workshop. Hoy me siento parcialmente nublado porque no tomé suficiente café antes del entrenamiento. Today I feel sunny with a chance of rain because I love working with teachers. However, I have so much work to finish. Hoy me siento soleada con oportunidad de lluvia porque Me fascina estar aquí con ustedes, pero tengo tanto trabajo que hacer al terminar este entrenamiento. Today I feel like a snowstorm is approaching because I have so much work to do, parents to call, and papers to grade. Hoy me siento como que una tormenta de nieve se aproxima porque tengo tanto trabajo que hacer, llamadas telefónicas a varios padres de familias y muchos papeles que calificar. Okay, so those are the examples that I've provided you with both in English and Spanish. Take a little bit of time to think about yours. Once you have your weather report, write it on a little Post-it note. So we are at our first stop and do. Think about the weather report activity and find your learning reflection guide because like I mentioned, it is time for our stop and do. Answer the following question. Seeing how the weather report activity is an excellent tool for social and emotional learning and it helps develop the 4 domains of language, how will you use this strategy in your classroom? So where do we start? Well, if you've ever played hopscotch, you know that you start at the beginning and take it one step at a time until we finish. So let's start. Today we're going to start talking about English learners in the United States. The visual you see before you is from research from the U.S. Department of Education. This map shows the percentage of public school students who are English language learners by state. Notice that the darker tealish, bluish colored states like Texas and California are the ones that have a higher concentration of English learners. In these states, 10% of the total population in public schools are English learners. The same research also revealed that the gap between English learners and native English speakers is not static, but widens as students move through school. The gap illustrates the daunting task facing our English learner students, who not only have to acquire oral and academic language, but also have to keep pace with native English speakers who continue to develop their own language skills. Some educators even argue that closing the gap is nearly impossible given the time constraints available in regular school hours. Now, with that said, imagine the achievement gap and what that gap is doing while English learners are learning remotely. Teachers and administrators are doing everything possible to create great lessons for remote learning. Unfortunately, remote learning is different than face-to-face. The reality is that during remote learning, it is hard for English learners to practice the 4 domains of language consistently. It is hard for English learners to develop oral language, and it is hard for them to demonstrate language output. So as educators, we continue to learn new strategies, new activities, new pedagogy that helps our students continue to grow. And that's a good idea. Considering that, according to the U.S. Department of Education, by the year 2030, the population of English learner students goes from 10% to 25%. So between now and 2030, we need to continue working to help close the achievement gap. In order to close the achievement gap, we do need to know a few things about what English learners need. So I did a little research, and here are some of the things that they need. Number 1, they need substantial amounts of practice in reading and writing. That makes sense, as the more you read, the more you know. Number 2, they need vocabulary acquisition. I would venture even to say that all kids need more vocabulary acquisition, regardless of whether or not they are English learners or not. And lastly, English learners need 12 to 14 exposures to words to get a level of comprehension where they can use the word in an academic setting. 12 to 14 exposures. Usually, when I talk to teachers, they tell me that while they understand and agree with the fact that English learners need 12 to 14 exposures with a word, they just lack the time in the day for students to practice. So how do we give English learners what they need then? Well, we start by teaching using the research-based best practices for English learners. Take a moment to read the list. I see some things like setting clear goals and expectations, providing curriculum-rich content, providing active engagement and participation, as well as periodic review and practice. There's that word again, practice. Practice is key. I'm sure that you've heard most of these best practices, and I'm also pretty sure that you are already using some of these best practices in your own classrooms. Look at the last one, cross-linguistic connections. I have to say that if you're not using that one yet, it's time to start using it. So like the research of Dr. Cummins points out, for transfer to be maximized, cross-linguistic connections between the two languages must be explicitly taught while students engage in a contrastive analysis of the first language and English language. So explicit cross-linguistic instruction needs to occur in the classroom with regards to letter sounds, words, vocabulary, syntax, grammar, as well as comprehension. And as Dr. Escamilla points out, as a result of working with two language systems, students' metalinguistic and metacognitive skills are enhanced when they learn about the similarities and the differences between the two languages that they're learning. And this is exactly what we want. We want students to learn from one language to enhance the other, which in turn allows them to learn two languages deeply. So let's stop and do. Find your learning reflection guide and answer the following question. How can we explicitly teach our students to engage in contrastive analysis of their first language and English? And this question is valid for an ESL classroom as well as a bilingual classroom. There are many things in an ESL classroom that you can do to help them engage in a contrastive analysis, regardless of whether or not you speak their first language or not. So the question again is, how can we explicitly teach our students to engage in contrastive analysis of their first language and English? Many teachers ask me, okay, that's great. You showed us the best practices of English learners, but how do we implement that? Well, we have to start with some strategies that are tried and true. For example, using gestures, body language, using lots of pictures while you're teaching, as well as realia. Always model the instruction and model the product. So model, model, model. Regardless of whatever grade level you teach, the students still need for you to model the learning and the product. Preview the materials, vocabulary, the pictures, anything that you can preview is a great way to do this, as well as allowing for alternate forms of expressing their understanding of the concepts. Not all children learn the same, not all students learn the same, and so we need to provide them different ways to express their understanding. And a lot of these strategies come from the book Integrated English Language Development, written by Dr. Mora Flores, as well as some of the ones that we're about to look at: multimedia, technology, using mentor text. We will experience that in this workshop today, and you'll see how great the use of mentor text is when working with English language learners. Being succinct, not speaking for 45 minutes, but speaking for 10 minutes and letting the students then process the learning. Repeated exposure to words, concepts, skills. Remember, our students need 12 to 14 exposures, so the repeated exposure to words, concepts, and skills is very helpful. Graphic organizers, and again, we go back to repetition. In order to develop language, we have to make sure that we are developing and practicing the 4 domains of language. And those are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Teachers have to work on creating input that is comprehensible, and that happens through listening and reading. But by the same token, students have to demonstrate learning with output strategies that incorporate speaking and writing. Most of the state standards want the students to demonstrate understanding by writing. Typically, the end goal is writing. There is nothing wrong with having writing as the end goal. However, English language learners need more opportunities to develop oral language first. Without teachers modeling the oral language and English learners having the opportunities to practice speaking the newly acquired academic language, they will not be ready to demonstrate understanding by writing. Remember, we discussed earlier in the workshop that English learners need 12 to 14 exposures to words to get a level of comprehension where they can use the words in academic settings. So let's also talk about virtual support that help English learners build oral language. When teaching remotely, depending on your grade level, having breakout rooms really helps as you can have more students practicing oral language. Show and tell is one of my favorites as it really works for all grade levels, especially since the students are showcasing something that is familiar to them. Having that familiarity really helps them feel confident when speaking. The great thing about show and tell is that you can tie this back to your instruction. Whip Around is also a great virtual oral language support. Students can give a one-answer response or a one-word response to a question that you ask or at the end of the learning. Another one of my favorites is thumbs up and thumbs down. It's especially helpful when you are teaching remotely. It is a great way to get all students engaged in the learning, as well as giving you a quick way to assess who is on the right track. Other important virtual supports include matching games, sentence frames, graphic organizers, I do, we do, you do, the one sentence wonder, which is very similar to the whip around, as it's basically they're summing up the learning in one sentence and it's very quickly. Drawing it on whiteboards, discussion boards, chat boards. My favorite is the virtual word walls. Students always need support with words in a virtual word wall that you can make available to the students in whatever platform that you want to use. I created this one on Jamboard as I was working with students with a math lesson, but you can create it on whatever platform that you have access to and make sure that the students have access to it as well. In addition, I actually allow students to add words and I ask them to add their words in a specific color. So any student added word, for example, can be in blue. And they could put it up there with a blue Post-it, with blue text, however you want to do that. It is a great way to make sure that the kids remember the words for the units and are able to practice it. When you have them write something, always have them refer back to the virtual word wall. In addition, this is a matching game that I also created on Jamboard. Again, you can create it on any platform that you have available to you. This one allows a student to match math vocabulary words to visuals that represent the meaning of the math vocabulary words. So they have the ability to sort virtually and move either the visuals or to move the Post-its into the right place and match them together. So this is a very good activity that you can also create depending on whatever it is that you are teaching. So let's start on building vocabulary. Building vocabulary has some non-negotiables. We always want to learn and teach vocabulary from context. Number 2, teachers use comprehensible input when trying to teach new words. 3, teachers and students need to read, and read. The more you read, the more you know, is what I keep hearing and what I keep saying, but it's absolutely true. The more you read, the more vocabulary you acquire. And lastly, we need to combine different modes of learning. We are not all visual learners, and students need to experience learning in different ways in order to maximize exposure and learning. Let's work on strategies for before reading a text. For the purpose of this workshop, we will use a mentor text card for the before, during, and after reading activities. In order to build background knowledge and work on building vocabulary, I like to use a visual and make statements with an anticipation guide. The students then agree or disagree with the statements. If they agree, they will show a thumbs up on the screen or in the class or in the chat feature. If they disagree, then they show a thumbs down. If they're not sure, they put their thumbs sideways. So this is a great, easy way for you to know how much background knowledge they have, how much vocabulary they have, or how much vocabulary they lack. So this is a great strategy for emerging language students. This strategy to preview reading comes from connecting content and language, and the mentor text we will be reading comes from Language Power. The photograph you see is from the mentor text, so we are analyzing the photo and using and learning vocabulary in context. I start off by reading a statement from the anticipation guide. So the first statement is, the photograph was taken in a parade. The students would either agree or disagree with me using their thumbs up and thumbs down strategy. Remember, if they are unsure about this first statement, then it will let me know that perhaps they don't know what the word parade means. At this point, I ask the students, how do you know this photograph was taken at a parade? The oral discussion that takes place between the students and I is gold because this allows me to understand their background knowledge. And this allows the students to also learn from me, but also learn from their peers. So I get a lot of answers like, I know it's a parade because I've been to one. Because they're outdoors, because they're wearing a uniform, because they've got instruments, all sorts of words like this. I usually start an anchor chart and I start writing the key words that they give me, as this helps other students with the words. So then we move on to the next statement, which is the people are outdoors. And again, they have to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if they disagree or agree. And then I ask my question, how do you know the people are outdoors? The students usually reply with, we know they are outdoors because we can see the trees. The people are walking on a street and the sky is blue. Do you see what is happening? Their language may be limited, but we are still working on grade level standards. Students are using a photograph and they are inferencing. They are also providing text evidence for their inferencing. And furthermore, we are analyzing visuals. We're analyzing a text, which is so important as they become readers. So let's read the third statement. During the parade, you will hear loud noises. Again, the students respond with a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a sideways thumb. You will want to know how they know they will hear noises. Just by asking how and why, you are raising the rigor of this activity and you're preparing them to begin reading. So of course, we will read and discuss all of the statements. The next one is, the people are in a marching band. Again, the students will respond with a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a sideways thumb, because we want to know if they understand what is a marching band. We'll ask, how do you know? And they'll give us their answers. And the last statement we will read is, the people are going to play music. The students will respond with a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a sideways thumb. And we will ask the question, how do you know? So now we've read all of the statements that you see on the anticipation guide. Remember, we discussed that English learners need to develop oral language. This is a great way to start building oral language before we even read the text. Keep in mind that the way that we build language is with the 4 domains of language, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In this activity, we have listened, we have spoken, We have read because we have the statements in front of us, and even the picture is considered reading. We didn't write, but very quickly we could have added a writing activity to this emerging before reading activity. So like I mentioned, this is an activity for emerging English learners. How would you differentiate for an expanding English learner? I have actually done that for you. I've provided you with some differentiation support. You would use the same picture and have the students in pairs or by themselves write a list of about 10 to 15 words to describe what is going on in this picture. Then you would have them group the words into categories. This strategy also allows for oral language development and great teacher-student discussion before the text has even been read. So some of the words that I get, I'll just throw some out there. Uniform, instruments, I see trees, I see the sky, I see spectators. And so now I've given you 5 words. Think about those 5 words. How could we group those into categories? It could be people, it could be places, it could be nouns, it could be verbs, it could be anything that they want to group into categories. And then they sort those words into their categories. So it becomes a very interesting activity, and you could even stem off and have them write a prediction based off of the words that they've given us. And that way we have addressed the listening, the speaking, the reading, and the writing. All right. So we've done something for our emerging students, and now I've showed you a strategy for our expanding language students. Well, what about our bridging language students? How would you differentiate for a bridging English learner? Easy. You'd still show them the photograph, and you would have an oral discussion before you ever ask them to do anything. You'd have an oral discussion where the students would describe what they see in the photograph. And then I would even take it a step further and say, great, we've talked about what you see in the photograph. Now write a paragraph. What do you see in the photograph? And use the word walls to help you. So again, this strategy allows for oral language development and great teacher-student discussion before the text has even been read. Let's review real quickly the 4 domains of language. So we have listening, we have speaking, reading, and writing. And now it's time for our next stop and do. Find your learning reflection guide and answer the following question. Take a moment to reflect on what domains of language we addressed in the before reading activities that I provided for you. Reflect on what domains of language we addressed in the before reading activities. Okay, we have just finished our stop and do, and now I need to take a look at some other words that may be in our reading that may cause problems for my students. So even before we ever start reading the text, I decide which of those words we probably haven't addressed with the anticipation guide, and I want to make sure that we address it with what I call painting a picture. So one of the words I really want to make sure that my students understand before we get into reading the text is parade. I'm going to give them a definition. A parade is a public procession, especially one celebrating a special day or event, and it includes marching bands and floats. Coincidentally, for those of you that are ESL and bilingual teachers, a procession is a cognate. In Spanish, the word is procesión. So this is important to note, as helping students make those cross-linguistic connections is a best practice when working with English learners. I'm going to show them 4 pictures of the parade. I will invite the students to share what they see in the pictures. I will probably have to guide the discussion with some questions. So the first picture I show, I ask them what they see. And we talk about the instruments. This is a trumpet. We see people playing the trumpets and they're in uniforms. Their uniforms are red and gold. In the background, you can see some people possibly even watching them. The next photograph, remember we're painting a picture here, is of people in a different uniform carrying flags and marching. You can even do TPR strategies here, total physical response, where you actually march in place. And you can even do that through Zoom. Students can get up and practice and march in place as you are teaching. The third picture is of some drums. There are drums in a marching band, and so we want to make sure that our students know that. You can even make some gestures as to how you would play the drums, just to make sure that our students are truly understanding what a parade is. And lastly, we have a picture of the spectators. They're all wearing green, so this makes me think that this is a St. Patrick's parade, and we want to make sure that our students understand now what parade means. The next word is cymbals. It's a musical instrument consisting of a slightly concave round brass plate, which is either struck against another one or struck with a stick to make a ringing or clashing sound. So that's a definition of cymbals, but it's a really hard one to, if you're an English language learner, it's a really hard one to picture. So we want to make sure that we're painting the picture. These are the brass plates that we're talking about in the definition. We said they were slightly concave, round brass plates. You see the little girl here holding them, and she's going to hit them together to make that noise that the cymbals make. Here's another picture, different angle, same round brass plates, and she's about to strike them together to make the noise that the cymbals make. There is another picture. You see the handles there. That's where the kids or the people who play the cymbals actually hold the instrument. And then lastly, there's a picture of one that doesn't have the handles that you would actually hit with a stick to make the ringing or clashing sound. The last word we want to talk about is the bass drum. So here is the drum. It's a big drum. We have some marching students here wearing a bass drum below their waist. Notice I'm using some words that students typically have a problem or typically have difficulty understanding. So we have a picture. This is below their waist. We also need to let them know that bass drums can also be worn above their waist. So there's different types of bass drums, and we also want to show them what it looks like when they're hitting the drums. The last one is clatter. Clatter is a continuous rattling sound as of hard objects falling or striking each other. So typically I want to make sure that they understand what that looks like. I give them a visual of maybe some dishes falling from the cupboard and hitting the ground, and it makes that clatter sound, the da, 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 da. If I were in front of the kids, I would play the video and you could hear the sound that clatter makes, and that definitely paints a picture for them. So let's talk about comprehension. We really haven't even read the mentor text yet. However, we have already begun working on comprehension. Take a look at the comprehension strategies on the screen. We have setting a purpose for reading, generating questions, predictions, mental imagery, making connections, inferencing, evaluating details, synthesizing information, and monitor comprehension. Which of these have we already addressed before reading the text? I'm going to give you a moment to think about it. We have actually addressed several of them, but here are a few that stick out in my mind. For example, mental imagery. We were painting the picture of the meaning of the words, which really creates a mental image. We also worked on inferencing and synthesizing information as we did some work with the visuals. And we are also about to work on prediction. So based on the pictures that I've showed you that come from the text and the vocabulary that we have reviewed, what do you think this mentor text will be about? So let's stop and do. Find your learning reflection guide and answer the following question. Based on the pictures and the vocabulary that we have reviewed, predict the main idea of the mentor text. We would want to do the same thing with our students. We would want to make sure that they write down what they think the text will be about. We want to make sure we're giving them opportunities to predict. And we also want to make sure that they understand that you can predict based off of the things that I've showed you. And there's not a right or a wrong answer. It's okay to feel safe in giving your prediction. So I'm going to give you a few moments to find the learning reflection guide and answer the question based on the pictures and the vocabulary we have reviewed. Predict the main idea of the mentor text. Alrighty, I think you're done predicting, and now it's almost time to read the mentor text. But first, we have to set a purpose for reading. This mentor text lends itself for several purposes of reading. One could be appropriate expression. The other could be exclamation points. Number 3 could be onomatopoeias. And lastly, comprehension. For this workshop, our purpose for reading is the exclamation point, which, by the way, if we pay attention to the exclamation points, we will read with expression, and you will notice that the mentor text has onomatopoeia that is usually followed by an exclamation point. So really, we will be using appropriate expression while reading the onomatopoeia that have exclamation points, and all of these put together will help us with the comprehension of the mentor text. For our reading today, we will be using a strategy from the book Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Teaching and Learning by Dr. Shiraki Hawley. The teacher reads and students echo, or read after the teacher reads a phrase. So it literally sounds like the kids are your echo as you're reading line by line. There are some very important things to this strategy, some benefits of echo reading. You as the teacher are modeling fluent expressive reading. Many times I ask teachers what they've done for read alouds, and many times teachers respond, we don't have time to do read alouds. And that's a shame, really, because our students need good models of reading. So with this strategy of echo reading, you are being the model of what fluent expressive reading sounds like. Through this strategy, our students are learning and developing fluency, as well as expression and decoding skills in a safe environment where they will be, it's kind of non-threatening for them to speak up and read as everybody else is reading along with them. So here is the text. It is titled Oompa Oompa. It is now time to echo read. I won't be able to hear your echo reading, but I am counting on it. So let's make the text bigger so that you may echo read with me. Are you ready? Here we go. I will read a line and pause. While I pause, you will read the same line. You will be my echo. Let's practice this to see how it works out. Here we go. Oompa Oompa. Oompa Oompa. Here comes the parade. The cymbals crash. The trumpets blare. The fire engine blasts the air. Boom goes the bass drums. Here comes the parade. The children shout. The marchers' feet are stamping, tramping in the street. Clang, clang goes the bell. Here comes the parade. The bagpipes drone. The piccolos cry. The rat-tat-tat as the band goes by. Oompa, oompa. There goes the parade. The clatter dies. The noises fade. Everything's quiet after the parade. All right, I really do hope you were my echo and that you saw how this works. The kids really love this strategy. It does take a little bit of time to practice it together and make sure that we're all together as we're reading it, but it is a great strategy, like I said, for them to develop fluency, expression, and reading skills. There were some words that could have caused confusion, so we did a little bit of closed reading. Basically, we talk about the words and have the students go into the text to see which meaning of the word makes sense. One of the words that could cause confusion is drone. The mentor text card Oompa Oompa uses the word in the line, the bagpipes drone. This is not a word that many students are familiar with. They know drone as either an aircraft drone or a drone robot. So what I do is I provide visuals for the meanings of drone and have them go back into the text to decide which drone the mentor text Oompa Oompa is referring to. Once they see the visuals and go back and read the line of the text, they quickly reply that the text is referring to a sound. We then discuss what that sound sounds like. Another of the words that could cause confusion is the word fade. The mentor text card Oompa Oompa uses the word in the line, the noises fade. Again, this is not a word that many students are familiar with. They know fade as a men's haircut. So again, what I do is provide visuals for the meanings for fade and have them go back into the text to decide which fade the mentor text Oompa Oompa is referring to. Once they see the visuals and go back and read the line of the text, they quickly reply that the text is referring to a sound fade. We then discuss what that sounds like. With this specific text, I also have students discuss what things make a drone sound and where else they hear sound fade. As you can see, by asking these types of questions, I am providing the students with more opportunities to practice the vocabulary while at the same time raising the rigor of the lesson. So now it's your turn. Let's stop and do. Find your learning reflection guide and answer the following question. Really, what I want you to do this time around is make a list of objects that might make a drone sound and also provide examples of sound fading. I really want you to understand what this little activity provides for the students. It really makes them think a lot more because they have to think of objects that make the drone sound and provide examples of sound fading. But also, if you have them talk to partners before they actually go into the activity, they're practicing that language over and over again. And don't forget that our students need 12 to 14 exposures to a word before they can start using it. So this is just one of my ways to get them to practice and raise the rigor of the lesson. So go ahead and make your list. Remember, you're making a list of objects that might make a drone sound, as well as providing examples of sound fading in everyday life. All right, I think that you have now finished that stop and do. And now we need to move right along. We've come to the part of the workshop where we discuss what we do after reading. What are the after reading activities? As you know, an onomatopoeia is a word which imitates the natural sounds of a thing. It creates a sound effect that mimics the thing described, making the description more expressive and interesting, all while helping the reader imagine. So I am sure that you were able to detect a lot of onomatopoeia in the reading today. So we will go ahead and reread the Oompa Oompa Mentor text card and pick out 2 or 3 onomatopoeias as you read. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to find your 2 or 3 onomatopoeias. Write them down on a sticky note. All right, so I think you've probably picked out your 3 already. I wonder if we picked out the same words, but here's what I picked out. I selected the word crash, boom, clang, rat-tat-tat, and oompa oompa. Now that we have identified the onomatopoeias within the text, let's identify what could make the noises that represent the onomatopoeias. So what I would do with the students then is create 4 columns. The column has the first onomatopoeia within the text, which is oompa. The pink card asks us to think what instrument makes the oompa sound. I have already modeled my thinking in the first column. You'll see here, I've selected a tuba as the instrument that makes the oompa oompa sound. Let's move to the second column. The onomatopoeia is a clang. What instrument do you think makes the clang sound? When I do this with students, most of the time they go ahead and say cymbals. So we do this one together. The first one I modeled for them. The second onomatopoeia, the clang, we do it together. And so most of the times the kids tell me it's a cymbal and we add the picture. So after you do that one, we move on to the third and the fourth column, which the onomatopoeia for the third one is rat-tat-tat. And now students will have to come up with their own. I no longer am helping them. They have to come up with their own instruments that makes the rat-tat-tat sound and their own instruments that make the boom sound. Once they are done, we have a nice resource with onomatopoeias and what sounds they could represent. This may prove to be useful if students were asked to write a story with onomatopoeias. It could be a great writing resource to display or save in a writing digital folder. And the idea is, we've read a mentor text that has the onomatopoeias. Now let's let our students practice writing with onomatopoeias. So as we discussed earlier in the workshop, writing is always the end goal. And the back of the mentor text card provides additional resources. It has the words that students should know. Notice we went through most of these in our before reading activities. It also has some additional questions that the students can answer in written form, or you can discuss whole group, or students can discuss in groups or pairs. The card also has a note from the writer which addresses the use of onomatopoeias. But for today, we will be focusing on the section that is titled Be the Writer. All right, it reads, imagine being inside your home on a rainy, stormy day. You hear the rain pounding outside. You hear water dripping off the roof. Perhaps you hear thunder. Write a paragraph about it. Use details and sound words to describe the storm. So to us, we're adults. That sounds like an easy task, and to some of us, it really doesn't. It could still be a daunting activity. So how can we get our students to engage in this type of writing when they feel like the task at hand is daunting? I decided to create a hyperdoc that chunks this writing assignment. You can do the same thing. I used Google Slides to do it, but you can use any product platform that you have. you will see here that I have chunked the writing assignment. The first thing is that I have added the prompt in the middle so that the students would have a clear understanding of the writing assignment. We will start where you see the red arrow and the text that says start here. You can click on the link in this document of the video of pounding rain, and you would see a video of pounding rain. This would give kids the background knowledge of what pounding rain sounds like and what it looks like. And then you can ask them to write an onomatopoeia. Notice that that's part of our assignment in Be the Writer. It says you hear the rain pounding outside. So that's one of the things we want to include in our writing. Next, we provide them with a video of water dripping off the roof. Again, that's part of the Be a Writer description, is that we should be able to write and describe what water dripping off the roof sounds like. So I provided the video for them in this document. Again, you could do the same thing, do this whole group, do this small group, however you want to do this. They watched the video, so now they've seen water dripping off the roof and they've heard it. And once they have done those things, they can write an onomatopoeia for water dripping off the roof. Remember, at the beginning of the workshop, I said that we need to model. So before you ever let the kids do this on their own, you'd have to model what this looks like. So the first time you're doing it together, chunking the writing with them. So then we move on to the next box, which is a video of thunder. As you know, in the Be the Writer part, it says perhaps you hear thunder. So next we'd move on to video of thunder. We provide them with a video of thunder, again, for the background knowledge. They can see it, they can hear it, and then provide us with an onomatopoeia for thunder. Again, if we're doing this whole group, we are writing an onomatopoeia together, which makes it that much easier for the students. And now we have the background knowledge because we've watched a video of pounding rain, we've watched a video of water dripping off the roof, and the video of thunder. So now we're ready to write a sentence that describes the rain. So notice the box says write a descriptive sentence for rain. So since we're modeling this together, for the first time we would write a descriptive sentence for rain together. And then we would move on to writing a descriptive sentence for thunder, and we would do this together. So you end up with 3 onomatopoeias and 2 sentences. That's a really good starting point to get you to the last request, which is write a paragraph about the rainy, stormy day that you hear from inside your home. You now have 3 onomatopoeias that you can use and 2 sentences that describe. It's a great starting point to help the kids finish writing a paragraph. We are now ready for our last stop and do. We have worked with a mentor text, Oompa Oompa, for this workshop, and we have been able to work on many skills. If I were using this in the classroom, I would have had the students reread as we worked on the different skills. But today we addressed oral language development, reading exclamation points, enhanced comprehension of text, descriptive language in the form of onomatopoeia, and writing descriptive paragraphs. After seeing all that we have been able to do with this text, what do you think is the benefit of having your students read a mentor text? Take a moment to reflect on that question. Find your learning reflection guide and answer the question, what do you think is the benefit of having your students read a mentor text? All right, so that brings us to our goals today. Today we reviewed best practices to support English language learners in a virtual environment. We discovered strategies to bridge the gap between content and language. And lastly, we explored new ways to engage English language learners with complex text and vocabulary acquisition. If you'd like to learn more from teacher-created materials, check out the free professional learning options at the link shown on the screen. Remember, we want to support you no matter where you are teaching today and in the future. As a company founded and run by teachers, we know your time is valuable. We appreciate you spending some of that time with us and hope that this training will help you be successful in implementing strategies for supporting language learners in remote teaching environments and increase your students' understanding of content and language at their grade level. And of course, to help you create a world in which your students love to learn. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful school year.